it's not about the title, it's about the skills. And it's about the process. It's about really building the foundation. And I didn't have anyone in my life at the time that let me know that. At some point as a professional, especially people in leadership, when you graduate from a manager to a leader, mentorship's not an option. It's actually how you manifest and create value. At some point in your career, you're gonna amass most of the knowledge you need to propel yourself successfully as a professional. And your job as a leader is to reinvest that knowledge in teaching to others. That's how you create institutional value.
I'm Devin Reed.
And I'm Sheena Badani.
And you're watching Reveal, the Revenue Intelligence podcast powered by Gong.
Keep watching here to see the full interview, or if you like to listen to podcasts on the go, check out the links in the description below.
And if you like what you hear, subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or all of them. Why not? And while you're there, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. We personally read every single one, and I think I speak for both of us when I say they mean the world to us.
Could not agree more, Devin. Now, without further ado, here's the episode you've been waiting for.
Peter, it is 4 o'clock on a Friday, which is arguably the best time to record an interview on Reveal. So I want to say thanks for spending some time with us before you jump into the weekend.
Yeah, my pleasure. Honored to be here.
So we might mention him later in the podcast, but we got connected through Ryan Longfield, Gong's CRO, because he was on the podcast recently. And we said, hey, who should we talk to? And there was 3 names, but Peter, your name was the first. I don't know if you did that in order or, it was random, but I like to think that you were the first person that came to mind.
Oh, well, that's sweet. Ryan and I go way back, and we've spent a lot of time with each other, both professionally and personally. And it's a real honor to be listed in that list of 3. I don't know who the other 2 were, but we can talk about that later.
That's the time. I'll tell you what, they're not on the podcast yet. So
That's right. Made the cut. Through the velvet rope.
There you go. So, hey, you are the Chief Sales Officer at Relativity. Would you mind just taking a quick minute to just explain what you're responsible for, what you're doing over there, and if you want, what problem that Relativity solves?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I've been with Relativity for about 3 years now. It's a Chicago-based software company. We're in the broad categories in legal tech, and our origin story is in the very specific area of e-discovery. And so if you're in law and you're specifically in litigation, and you are going through the process of essentially collecting and reviewing evidence that may be part of any sort of litigation, you need to go through a discovery process, and with all information now being primarily digital, it's now happening electronically. And so it's like the collection, the review, the processing, and production of all this evidence data. And so as a chief sales officer, I lead global sales. So we have teams here, obviously in the US, an office in Europe based out of the UK. We have a Poland location, as well as our APAC team, which is in various parts of Australia and in Hong Kong. And so help lead the sales process, drive revenue for the company. And I also, in my role as Chief Sales Officer, oversee revenue operations, as well as sales development and sales engineering.
Nice, right on.
Yep.
Very interesting. Now, we brought you on, and we said why we brought you on. We asked you what you want to talk about, and you said you were passionate about developing go-to-market leaders through mentorship. But before we get into that and some of the advice you're going to give, what was your first management job, and what did it teach you about leadership?
My first management job was a Subway sandwich manager when I was 15. Where I was entrusted with the keys to the kingdom and opened up the store, managed the staffing, managed the register and counted all the cash down, if you will. And so that was actually my first management job. And it was, let's just say, a formative experience for me. But my first corporate professional experience was probably in 2002, where I think in typical fashion, I was sort of young and ambitious individual contributor and managed a team of peers that I probably took on too early. So I spent a year as a manager of a sales team. It was sort of like an add-on product to the software company that I was working for. It was, had a core piece of technology and some add-on products. I managed the add-on team, spent a year managing my peers, left, went back to individual contributor for another 7 years until I felt more ready to lead again.
That now, I'm going to ask a question. You can pass because it's your right to do so as our guest. But when you mentioned, hey, maybe I got into it a little early. Was there an event or something happened, or maybe a realization where you kind of noticed, hey, maybe I need to take a step back to take a step forward again?
Yeah, I think, and it's actually something I reference it with actually great, sort of like gratitude that it happened to me. I have a story of, listen, like career and advancement's not all up and to the right. It's quite episodic. It's quite peaks and valleys.
Absolutely.
And that was absolutely a valley in the moment, but maybe a peak from my learning in my career. And so, I think what it came down to is, as I mentioned, I was an individual contributor ready for advancement. And for me, advancement was actually in title. And so as a person that looks at the optics of advancement, you look at what's the next thing, and the next thing is all the focuses. And what I've learned as a professional that is really focused on developing to be a great leader, to be a great professional, it's not about the title, it's about the skills, and it's about the process. It's about really building the foundation. And I didn't have anyone in my life at the time that let me know that. And so left to my own devices as a 27-year-old kid, for that matter, I was so focused on the title and the stature and not necessarily the underpinnings of what it meant to be a good manager, an effective manager, and ultimately a great leader. And so I sort of got to the end point without going through the journey. And that was the real realization in practice. So, Devin, when I was going through it, I remember this moment where I was like really struggling, and I looked at my wife like 8 months into the job. I'm like, I don't think I'm good at my job. I don't think I like it. And it was like a real low point, because it was failure. But it wasn't really failure. It was just lack of preparedness and lack of understanding of what my role was. And it was really inexperience, in other words. And so for me, I think it was a great lesson in reaffirming or reevaluating what was important. And I was missing building blocks, core essential skill sets that I felt like I need to have first as an individual before I led people. And so my choice to go back into individual contribution was just that. Go back to school, learn some of the trade, understand what it means to be a great seller before I start leading people that I don't actually know what they do. Yeah. And so it was a really wonderful lesson, and it absolutely prepared me better for round 2 for managing and leading people. And interestingly, in the same company, I became a player coach again in the same company, different role. And I was so much better as a player coach because of it. And the real life lesson there was patience, but not patience for patience sake, patience because it was such an amazing opportunity for me to really build the base and foundational skill sets that made me a more effective manager in the future.
Definitely. It is a great story and a high level of self-awareness, right? That you had to have. So I respect that for sure.
But it seemed like in that scenario, it was a bit of your own self-realization and self-awareness that you realized you had to take a step back. I'm curious, like if there was a time either before or later in your life where it was a mentor that came in and helped guide you to a decision in your life.
Yeah. Well, it's in many, absolutely. And I think in many ways, career journeys, professional journeys, there are those moments where there's that person that really was an inflection or an influence that's sort of above the fray, right? That individual that changed, I think of them as little inflection points. It like steered you in a direction, and it hopefully put you in a trajectory that was positive and a net benefit to you. And that happened actually, in that company. So I spent 11 years at one software company. It was frankly my first corporate job, and I ended up spending 11 years there. It was really just great fortune, wonderful company. I started off as a tech support rep. It was the only job that I could get. I had, as I think about it, negative skills. I was a philosophy and religion major in college. I'd spent a year and a half after college being somewhat nomadic and traveling and working in a mountain bike shop in Chicago. I literally had no skills to prepare me for the corporate life other than a little bit of interest and ambition to come out west. I landed in San Francisco, tech company hired me into their support team. Not that I ever dreamed of being in support, but I have a sort of propensity for problem solving, and I was like mildly technically adept. And so they hired me to like answer, I remember 30 calls a day. This is all like client server based software. This is pre-cloud. And I like was in a financial services software company talking to traders and portfolio managers about stuff that I'd never known before. And I remember my manager, Toby Yoder, someone I'm still, acquainted with today. He was a sales guy that wanted to be a manager, and for some reason, the company said, "You want to be a first-time manager? Go be a support manager." And so he became my manager. Now Yoder, we got to know each other. He's like, "You know what? You should go into sales." And I was like, "Nah, sales?" I'm like, like sales, like slinging stuff, like used car salesman sales. I'm like, that's not for me. I like client relationships. I like solving problems. And he did something that I'll never forget, which was he listened. He introduced me to then the head of sales and the head of pre-sales consulting. And he showed me what great sales was by having me demystify for my own self through the leaders at the time what it meant to be a real effective sales leader. Because really great sales is not about doing something or persuading someone to do something they don't want to do. It's about creating mutual value, about helping customers solve really deep and hard problems. And so once I learned that, I was like, yeah, I'm a problem solver. Okay, I'm actually like more like a salesperson than I thought. And so Toby was actually the person that brought me to sales. He actually introduced me to Rick Dietz, who at the time was pre-sales engineering manager, and I transitioned from support into pre-sales. And from pre-sales, after 2 years in that stint, I found myself in client sales. And forever since then, I've been in sales. And so that moment of real reluctance, I mean, I was full on, Toby, I'm never going to be a salesperson, to an understanding and on his part, great compassion of understanding my sort of like misunderstanding and what he educated me. I'll never forget, and it changed the course of my career.
That's such an amazing story, and really kind of put you on that different trajectory, like you were talking about. And fast forward, now you're super passionate about developing leaders and utilizing mentorship as part of that process. Tell us a little bit more, like if you kind of break down, like what does mentorship actually look like in practice? What does it mean? What does it mean from your standpoint?
Yeah, I think I'll answer the question, but in terms of like what it really means in practice. But for me, this is something that in many ways is a bit intrinsic for those of those folks that know me personally. I really love investing in relationships. I have lots of close friends, and my wife and I share a passion for creating community. We're really great party hosts. Throw lots of parties at our house, and so I think a little bit's innate, but at some point as a professional, especially people in leadership, when you graduate from a manager to a leader, it's your job, and mentorship's not an option. It's actually how you manifest and create value. At some point in your career, you're going to amass most of the knowledge you need to propel yourself successfully as a professional. And your job as a leader is to reinvest that knowledge in teaching to others. That's how you create institutional value as you sort of progress through your career, in my opinion. So partly it's a bit innate, part my feeling that's my job. Now in practice, I feel like mentorship for me is, I guess in practice feels like the following. One, you got to create the time. So if you're going to mentor people, you need to create the time, like literally budget the time. I'm not saying like that hour on that random day, create a routine of time allocation and space, because the context and the acknowledgement of commitment to that time to mentorship and improvement and betterment is important. It allows people to prepare. It allows people to change the context of their busy day, come to that time to engage in mentorship. So that deliberateness, important. Create the time. I think secondly, clarify the intention. So for me, when I think about mentoring people, it's like sometimes they want mentorship and I am not equipped to provide them the type of guidance they need. And so being explicit and clear about what type of mentorship is being sought is really important for me between mentor and mentee. I would love to believe I can wing it in a lot of stuff. But if I'm going to invest in someone, it's because I believe I can intrinsically help them be better at whatever they're seeking to be better at. And so just clarifying the intention of that time together up front is really important for both parties, just to make sure it's time well spent. And then lastly, I think for me, the act of mentoring is never about giving answers. Like I'm oftentimes a sounding board where I give an answer. Hey, I think I'm thinking about doing this. Do you think I'm right or wrong? And in that moment, I'm a sounding board. Yes, you're right, or no, I think you should do it this way. But in mentorship, I feel like, the way I think about the way I show up, I'm not coming to the meeting to be their manager. I'm there to be their mentor. And for me, mentorship's about teaching a process. How do I teach them to answer the question they have at the surface, that they're struggling with, that they're challenged by? How do I teach them the process of how I or they can effectively unpack the problem and resolve it themselves? So I rarely tell answers, I teach process. That's how I think about mentorship. So, and I really focus on the constructs, the frameworks, the things that I'd like to know if I were in their shoes before I go seek a decision around X. And we talk about the process of whatever it is they're trying to try to resolve. And I think that to me is like the moment of mentorship. Teach the process, not the answer.
That's fantastic, Peter. I got a quick question for you. I beat Sheena off mute, which means you had a really good answer because we're both gunning for a follow-up question. It's going back to creating time. So I'm curious if you do this as part of some of maybe your standing one-on-ones, or if this is additional time. I'll let you answer that. Then I got one more follow-up, Sheena, and then I'll mix over to you.
Yeah, for me, I think to answer your question, I create separate time for mentorship. And I think context matters, especially with reports. So when I'm managing my team, I would like to say like my management style is a bit mentorship, bit leadership, bit management. Management's like where you're telling people being more directive. Leadership is more about inspiration, and mentorship is more about general coaching, as I mentioned. But like I'd say that I think for me, mentorship is something that I do separate from my directs. And I would look at that because, again, the context is really important. And so I try not to conflate those. And in general, I do it all the time, honestly. And I think I do it bespokely. I sort of think about it as, and for people that have been a part of my leadership team, I sort of jokingly say, like, you got a lifetime membership to my accessibility, sort of like part of the family forever. And I think about that for Ryan. Ryan and I have maintained great contact over the years. It's been years since we actually worked closely together where he was part of my leadership team. But I enjoy the random texts I get from him from time to time. It's lifetime membership. So, but to answer your question, I do enjoy it all the time. And I do create separate, discrete space because I think it's most effective for the individual when it's mentorship space and time.
Nice. Well, one more quick follow-up question. I have the answer is probably either you, the mentee, or mutual. But who kind of owns to ensure that time happens and that preparation occurs?
Yeah, I mean that's all the mentee. The way I think about it is a mentor offers their time, and the way I think about it is like, listen, I'm going to make my time available. That's like the first thing I can do to help support an individual, make myself accessible. How we use that time constructively, it's all the mentee. And I think the intentionality when I go through a sort of a mentee-mentor relationship, when I offer my time to someone, I make sure it's clear, like, this is their time. I have no agenda other than to serve their ultimate needs and to be however I can be supportive for them. And so I think the use of that time is on the mentee, and they should take advantage of it.
And how do you know, like, when this relationship between the mentor and mentee is working?
Yeah, I think there's like, I'd probably answer it in like a couple different ways. So
Sure.
One, just ask them, like, is this advice? Yeah. How's it going? Is this working? Is this even useful? Like, what are you getting out of it? Is this, basically is my advice impacting you in the way in which you hoped it to be, right? So, like sometimes people just need affirmation. Sometimes people just need to, they're going through real transformation as an individual. And so however it is they're hoping to absorb this time with me or other mentors, I literally ask the question, like, is this impacting you in the way that you hoped it would? Mm-hmm. I think more indirectly, as more of a casual observer, how do I think, how do I believe that I can witness the impact of my mentorship? I think it's, a lot of it comes into the way in which they reflect on circumstances. Oh, that thing happened what I told you about, and I remembered what you said, and I did this thing, and I had this experience that was different than what I would have done had I not spoken to you. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's like, oh my God, like I was going to fall into that pattern. I remember what we talked about, and I did this differently, and it totally changed the outcome of this really difficult conversation. And so when you start hearing examples of the application of the thing you talked about and feeling the ownership of it being part of the native response or sort of thought process of the person you're working with, that's like a really wonderful sign of achievement in terms of impact. And I really do. In fact, just before this call, I had a mentorship session with a former direct, and we had talked real quickly. She's got promoted to the big job, and she's now the SVP of sales and running a global team. And we had this like little 20-minute call. I sent a little congratulation call. We had a chat. We talked about the scope of role and what she's done to bind. So we had a little mentorship session. And honestly, in that like 10-minute congratulations / here's some tips to this call, she's already like quoted and said, yes, when you said that thing, here's what I immediately did at work the next day. And so like, she's one of my favorite all-time people that I know that she's applying what we talk about and then building on it to make it her authentic sort of DNA. It's like part of her thing. And so it's really cool to see. And it's really rewarding for me just to watch people absorb and actually apply what you talk about.
That's the best. Well, congrats to her, and maybe we get her on the show next.
Yeah.
And, do a little mentorship chain, and whoever she mentors, we can get Peter, this has been great so far. I imagine folks who are listening might be thinking, okay, how can I level up my mentorship skills?
Yeah.
Right? What can I do to get better and to put some of these things in practice? So do you have any advice on what folks can do? Today's Friday they're listening to this on Monday. So on Tuesday, the next day, whenever it is, they hear this, what can they do to become a more effective mentor?
Yeah, I think it's I'm sure your audience of listeners is quite varied in terms of who they are and what sort of like role they have, et cetera. And, I would say, I would say irrespective of your position, right? You can be an SDR, you can be an AE, you can be first-time professional. There's always opportunities to mentor. And so I don't think it's a process that is dependent on your position or authority. Okay. And so just want to like call that out. Two, I think of it, I'll give two answers. One's like more of the IC perspective, because I get the question a lot like, hey, I'm not a manager, I'm an individual contributor. Like, how do I want to be a manager though one day? Like, how do I develop the skills to get to a place of positional authority to do so? And the advice I'll share here is the same, which is like, there's no better position to be in than one as a rep, because you can lead by example. And when you lead by example, what that really means is you've set a standard that is admirable, that's replicable, that is like, if your playbook, if your process becomes the process, if it becomes the standard, you're leading by example. And if you basically do your job well and are exceptional at what you do, and it becomes the standard, you're leading by example and therefore passive influence. And to then build on that as active influence, meaning like you can teach the thing that you've unlocked, that pitch that sort of you got from marketing, and it's like right there, but you tweak this one slide to reframe the constructive tension between you and prospect. And that's been the difference maker between you making your quarter and not. And you believe that can be something that can be replicable to more. Like that to me is like your platform. as a leader by example, as a rep, to mentor others. So when your way becomes the way, that's a form of mentorship that you're aspiring as an IC. And you have all the power in your control to do so. And so be great at your craft. Do something that can be replicated and be very open to sharing. Be that collaborative partner to like take your little tips and tricks that you've sort of nurtured and like share it broadly. That to me is like a no-brainer. So that's for all you ICs out there. If you're not doing that, that's like the first step. As a manager and as a positional leader, someone who's sort of like theoretically in a position of authority, I guess, to like manage and mentor people. I think for me, I think it is about deciding you're gonna create the time, block your time, and then go seek out ways to do so. So for example, one of the things that I've decided to do, just like in general, is anytime there's opportunities to mentor like young and emerging professionals, I choose to do so. So in my past life, in my current life, we have different recruiting programs. We're taking people from different backgrounds that frankly have no technical skill or sales skills, and we're recruiting them in a way that arms them with like the technology. They're coming from underprivileged backgrounds, et cetera, just don't have the resources that many of us had to be in our jobs. I've taken the time to mentor some of these individuals because I find it rewarding. That's how I've chosen to spend my time. And so just creating the time and then go seeking out. And I think that for me has been rewarding. I don't do it all the time, but when I do have time, I'm always up for it. And then honestly, reactively, I did a podcast a couple months ago. It's the first one I ever did. And some guy from Singapore reached out to me over LinkedIn saying, I listen to your podcast. Like, can I talk to you? I said, sure. And I had a really wonderful, 40-minute conversation with this individual in Singapore. And so for me, there's like a allocation of time in my head that I like to just freely just give to people who are interested. And so basically I say yes to the inbound and I seek outbound time from time to time when I have a little bit more space, and I take deliberate individuals like, young and emerging professionals as an example.
Well, after this goes live, you might get a few more inbounds. But I like the breakdown. That was really helpful, Peter.
Yeah, I love, I think like sometimes folks are like sitting and waiting, like, oh, somebody's going to come to me and like ask me to be their mentor one day. And it doesn't have to be like that. Like you just said, like you're really proactively will find those opportunities where you can help somebody.
Yeah.
So I really like that. And I don't know if you have any other like guidance on that, whether, for some folks, they may not have like a programs at their company where they're being set up with different folks.
Yeah. And, I guess like, here's how I think about it, which is even the objectification of mentor-mentee, those are words I never even use in my head. I'm just looking to hook people up and invest in them because I find joy in it. And so I think there is, for me, and I think for others seeking to be mentors, there has to be some intrinsic joy there. And I think that there's all shades of gray in terms of how mentorship happens. And so I think finding your authentic way by which you want to mentor people in not the big M formal way, programmatic way, but the little m, where you can just invest the time in others because you have something special to offer someone. And I think just choosing to find that time and to like tap into that thing that you believe could be valuable to others. If that's something that you enjoy, then yeah, I think be proactive in doing it. And I think that, for me, I just love doing it. I'll always offer my time. It's one of my joys of sales management and leadership. At the end of the day, while sales is a technical craft, don't get me wrong, there's real skills here. A lot of the skill of the role is about the investment in the people. Like productivity is a function of course, skill set, but it's also like, I call that like there's like the head part of sales, like the technicality of sales, and there's the heart. And you can get tons of productivity and joy and an outcome from a sales team by how you manage, the balance of head and heart in a sales organization. And so for me, the heart part is like investing in the people. That's the fun stuff. And so I guess, what I would encourage you all to do for those listeners is tap into the things that you find uniquely sort of enjoyable and go seek out a way to share that with someone else. And that's mentorship, frankly.
So Peter, we ask every single guest that joins us the same question. And how would you describe sales in one word?
Sales in one word. One word. That's really hard. Sales in one word. Wow.
Whatever that tells you.
Compassion.
It's a good one. It's a good
I
one.
like
Yeah.
it.
Based on
I don't
today's
think we've had
topic,
that.
that's very fitting. I will definitely say.
Yeah.
You're free to
Wonderful.
elaborate as well. I know we put people on the spot. If listeners know
Yeah.
we don't, of all the things we prep, we never tell people that last question.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, you go through all these, sales, execution, leadership, mentorship, and then it's like, just say sales in one word. And everyone's like, well, I only get one word. What should I say?
Yeah, well, and I use that word deliberately because I really do think great sales is about solving problems and understanding the problem from the perspective of the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And to really be effective at what you do, you really need to understand the nature of the problem from their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I certainly try to practice as a practitioner within the profession of sales. It's really never about me. It's about them and understanding them from their vantage point. And I think if you can really unlock that as the way by which you engage customers and prospects, I think it just it makes the sales process invaluable to your customer. And I think taking a disposition of compassion is really, for me, a great starting place, and it is like at the core what I'd like it to feel like.
I love that. Very heartwarming for the end of a Friday and touches on our entire conversation. So thanks so much, Peter.
Yeah, of course. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Peter. We appreciate you.
Yeah.